Good morning and welcome to Searching the Heart this fine Wednesday morning. Um, the trending topic, very important, Trump's invasion threat. I want to ask a question this morning. Does Nigeria need intervention? It's a very important question, and actually it came to me by surprise. I never expected that Trump would take such a radical decision or allude to such a radical step. But looking at it very closely, that is why I have tended to, with all my criticisms of Trump, I've tended to like the man. I've tended to appreciate the man because of that. He has something that many other leaders don't have. He's kind of a conscientious man. Okay, some of the decisions he takes, you think they are just from, some wild ambition. No, but he tends to look at things the way they really are. Having said this, the question still remains: does Nigeria really need intervention? To answer this question, I want to continue from where I stopped in the other episode. I've done quite a few episodes of Nigeria, and I've also traced the history of crises, taking JAWS as a case study. And I believe that some of the answers to some of the questions we'll be answering are hidden in some of those podcasts. So you might want to go there and, check them out. Okay? So I want to start from there. We have to, first of all, to know if Nigeria needs intervention, we have to go to the history. And it is not only the history of Nigeria, but the history of global politics as it relates to the Islamic world. Okay? And to Christianity in general. Okay? How have these things, what are the sources of these crises? And how have they developed? One very interesting material I'm very interested in is the recent interview given by the Most Reverend retired Benjamin Kwashi of the Anglican Church. Of course, Benjamin Kwashi has been a leader here in the Jos Plateau for so many years, and even while growing as kids, we knew him as a very, very straightforward and very, very very great leader in Christian terms. And yet, looking at that interview, you might want to pick one or two issues. And these are the issues that have actually plagued us in Nigeria and in Plateau. Remember that Benjamin Kwashi was at one time the advisor to the president, Obasanjo, on religious matters. Okay, so he has a lot of experience. But one thing you pick in his interview is he pointed very clearly the confusion that we face in trying to really understand the nature of the crisis. Okay, is it crisis for resources? Is it really religious? And of course, the tribal issues even came up. I like the interviewer who brought up the tribal issues, alluding to talking about Rwanda. Okay, in the genocide that took place in Rwanda, it wasn't really Christians against Muslims, but the animists were used to perpetrate the genocide in Rwanda. So these are the multifaceted issues, and if you followed my podcast, you would have seen this very clearly. I have spent a lot of time talking about necromancy, okay, and the source of necromancy. Okay, so this is very important to understand the solution, the problem, the source of the problem, and the solution. We have to trace it back, and to say it very clearly, Anglican Church has been in the middle of some of these discussions. Okay, early, a little before 2010, before the Boko Haram thing exploded, the Anglican Church was in the middle of its own issues. Okay, trying to decide okay, because some Nigerians had to fall back to animism, okay, fetish powers to defend themselves against some of these so-called Islamist insurgencies, and this created another problem of itself. So I think Benjamin Kwashi is a very good source, and yet you will discover that some of the problems right now, it is very difficult to pinpoint where the crisis is heading. We know where it is from, but where is it heading? Okay, and I'm going to use some of the time I have today to talk about some of these things. So we've looked at the history and nature of the crisis. Now let's look at the history of Christianity itself in Nigeria. Okay, and to be able to understand where we are heading, okay, where we are going, it has already begun. Trump has made the threat. Now we are having reactions, and reactions are coming from all over the country, okay, especially from the southern part of the country. Now, some people might start getting confused because not all Christians in Nigeria are, are really sure that there's any crisis or there's any genocide. We're going to answer that question. Is there a genocide? Okay, some of those reactions you get from around the country, okay? Many are saying, no, Trump, we don't want you. Suddenly, okay, we've had years and years of reports from the even southern-based media talking about this problem. Even Arise TV, TVC News channels, they have really spent time exposing this problem, okay? But suddenly, on the heels of Trump making his threat, now they are coming out to say, they are bringing people on who are saying, no, we don't want your intervention. We're going to look at that, okay? And to understand this, we need to understand the history and the nature of Christianity in Nigeria, okay? Nigeria itself is, like I have said before, is a multi-ethnic country, okay? This is a place where the British actually carved out, okay? It was never a country of its own, okay? They actually carved it out, shared it between themselves, the European powers, okay? And these are not a really homogeneous people. There is some homogeneity, okay? There is some homogeneity, but it is based on very great diversity, okay? So when you look at it, you discover that there are about 450 or more tribes or ethnic nationalities in this place called Nigeria. But of course, when the British came, they were able to identify three major groups, okay, which is the Hausa, the Igbo, and the Yoruba, okay, that make up the larger part of Nigeria. Now, over the history of Nigeria, the southern part of Nigeria, which is made up of the so-called Igbo and the Yoruba, had a very large early exposure to foreign powers like the British and the Portuguese. Of course, that and what that created was that a lot of their people were Christians, became Christians, accepted Christianity, okay? But as I say this, I want you to understand that many of these so-called Christians were not actually Christians. They were actually animists, okay? It takes a long time. It's the same problem in Europe, it's the same problem in the United States, okay? It takes a long time for somebody to really understand what Christianity is and actually accept it, okay? And but in general, they were mainly Christians, okay, from the south. But remember that the Yorubas from the southwest were also exposed to Islam very early, okay, and so many of them also were Muslims, okay? So there was this issue. In the north, okay, this is where the Usman Danfodio Jihad began, okay, and so a lot of the tribes in the north were already exposed to Islam. of course, also practicing their own different traditional religions. Also, okay. But very early on, a group of missionaries found their way into the north, okay, specifically the Middle Belt, which some were Catholics, but notable of these were the evangelicals, okay, from the SIM and from the SUM, okay. So these two groups found their way there, and silently a very influential form of Christianity, evangelical Christianity, began to grow in the north, okay. Spread from around the Jos Bauchi area right into the rest of the north. So this is very, we need to understand this. But because of the very extremely ethnically divisive atmosphere, because these people were not really people who had really come together as one country, okay, they were different tribal nations, and so they were deeply divided ethnically, okay. And because of this, the Christians in the south really looked at the north as just a Muslim enclave, okay. They never really recognized the minority evangelical Christianity that was growing in the Middle Belt, and they felt that they were the only Christians in the northern Nigeria, okay. Now this was aggravated when the Civil War broke out, okay. Yes, the Civil War broke out, and these minority Christians could not, they tried their best. I remember our parents told us stories of when some Igbos were being chased around, being killed just before the Civil War broke out in the north. Stories of how our people actually hid a lot of them, okay. Yeah, they rescued a lot of them and hid them because they had sympathy. These were Christians like them, and from that did not identify with the Hausa, Fulani, Caliphate or Sultanates that existed. So they hid a lot of them, and that was that. Of course, coincidentally, a person from the Middle Belt, from Plateau State, became the president of Nigeria. He was himself a Christian. And of course, this created some of the, balancing, okay. It did not help much, but it created some of the balancing. And of course, aggravated, because of this lack of balance that should have been, it aggravated some of the tribal tensions, you know. For years, even deep into the 80s, a lot of Southern Christians did not know that the Middle Belt, that they were Christians in the Middle Belt, okay. They associated us with Islam and associated with the Hausa language, of course, and the Fulani language, tribe, okay. So this was a problem in Nigeria. Now, this really complicates the issues, and I'll explain after this. I did a video explaining why Nigeria is such a complex geopolity, okay. You can refer to that video also, and I'll continue to talk a little about some of these issues, okay. And the issues at stake are very clear, that while these ethnic tensions continued, the main reason why the Igbos were able to easily re-assimilate into Nigeria even after the Civil War was that the existence of these minority tribes that were Christian, okay, from the Tiv, the Idoma, to the people in the Plateau, okay, in Plateau State, and in Adamawa, and in some of those north eastern states, okay. There were a lot of Gombe, you know, there were a lot of Christians within those areas, and they facilitated the ability of the Igbos to re-assimilate into Nigeria more easily than would have been thought. Okay, of course, we know the policy of Yakubu Gowon, who was the president of Nigeria at that time, who says, no victor, no vanquish. Okay, that was a Christian philosophy of turning the other cheek. So he said, no victor, no vanquish. And the Igbos easily re-assimilated themselves into Nigeria. And when you came to Nigeria in the 70s, 80s, you wouldn't know that there was a civil war in Nigeria, because everything was back to normal. Okay, so although up to today we still have those problems with the Nnamdi Kanu issue, and the guy in Finland, but because of humanity is like that. Okay, but that continues. So some of the problems we are having, and this complicates the issue, because you wonder, why are some people from the south very ignorant about the state of the north, as to Christianity, and at the same time a lot of them have re-assimilated into society. Okay, is because of the weak nature of the Christians within the Middle Belt, within the north. They are there, and they have between 1970s right into the 1990s, they had grown so much in population, and were very influential. But because of that, pre-existing factor of naming the eastern tribes as Igbo, the western tribes as Yoruba, and the northern tribes as Hausa, these minority Christians, as it were, that were a majority in their own enclaves, were never recognized. And of course, the agitation began in the early 90s, which I have talked about, to assert themselves as ethnic nationalities who had a more Christian foundation. They began to agitate. They wanted to be recognized, globally and nationally. Okay, even though, strangely enough, okay, even though they had risen to the point where one of their sons had become president, it was still not enough. They wanted more recognition, because as Nigeria was, a lot of the Christians in the south did not recognize that these people existed. Okay, they saw Gowon as a Hausa man, yes, and somehow that state of affairs still exists. I was shocked, really, personally, when I was listening to some of the comments on TV. I said, is Nigeria still this way, even after all we are going through? That a lot of the southern, so-called southern Christians still do not recognize that there are tribes in the Middle Belt that are mostly the victims of some of these insurgencies. Now, I'm going to talk a little about some of the issues that nobody is talking about. Now, we are trying to answer the question, is there a genocide in Nigeria? Okay? To answer this question, you have to look at the powers that have created this problem. Okay? I have already talked about some of the little issues as concerned the tribes, the state of minority, ethnicities, and the divisive state of Nigeria itself at independence. But someone or something took advantage of this situation and has created a dichotomy, okay? A paradox, as it were. And this paradox is simply that at a point during the development of this crisis, and this started about 2010, okay? At a point of the development of this crisis, nobody was sure who was fighting who. It started as, of course, a religious issue, but it became confused, okay? As you must have seen in the Benjamin Kwashi interview, okay? We began to wonder very late. I myself did not really get to this point till very recently, maybe about 2022. I began to get convinced that this crisis was not about religion, not about tribe, but about resources. Okay, it was about resources. I got convinced after my trip to Dubai and back. I got convinced that this whole thing was about resources. Okay, and not really about religion or about tribe. Okay, and this is what is going to rear its ugly head. And I think somebody in a church in Lagos, I think at Farasin, it was aired on Arise News, made a comment about the Dangote refinery, and accusing the US of trying to tap into the resources of Nigeria or stop Nigeria's progress. Now, I have a little sympathy with this because of this thing I'm talking about. This hidden face, this hidden person that is trying to complicate the crisis. Okay, this is a very clear phenomenon within the last 15 years that this crisis has continued. Okay, somebody is trying to hide the real nature of the crisis while killing minorities, while killing poor people, while killing people who cannot defend themselves. Okay, and of course, the aim is just to amass or to seize resources. Okay, to seize land, to seize maybe looking for rare earth minerals, or so on and so forth. Yes, he is right in that. We don't know whether it's from the US. We don't know whether it's from the Islamic world. We don't know whether the elite in Nigeria themselves are doing this. Okay, you will watch my other video about how the elite have successfully began to eliminate the middle class. And of course, you know that this is because of the existence of these rare earth minerals. They want people who are going to work in the mines and all that. Okay, I've talked about that. Okay, so yes, this does exist, but does this actually eliminate the fact that there may be an ongoing genocide against Christians in Nigeria? This is a question. This is the question that we all need to answer. And this is how we're going to reach a conclusion on what the solution would be. I will continue after this. So, is there a genocide? I'm going to start from one point. Talking about what Adifarasin said, okay? Well, he didn't look much like Adifarasin to me, but maybe he's a father or an older brother of Adifarasin. But he said this, on the issue of people, taking advantage of the crisis to tap into or to steal resources from this country, okay, or to stop the progress of this country, okay. And he quoted the crisis in Kano, okay, and the crisis in Kano that was a precipitate of the issue in, I think it was Denmark or so, about the caricature of the Prophet of Islam, and it spilled over to the streets of Nigeria. Why did it easily spill over to the streets of Nigeria, namely Kano? It was because already there was tension, okay? And I think that is what he missed. Okay, already there was tension, and something in the Netherlands or in Denmark, I can't remember which country it was, easily spilled to Nigeria. Why? Because tensions have already existed. And I want to remind him that that was the tail end of the crisis. Okay, if you trace the crisis properly, you will start from the 90s, from the Kaduna crisis, from the Bauchi crisis that came and spilled over to Jos, and then Jos became an epicenter. It went back to Kaduna, and then the tail, that was what happened in Kano, was kind of the tail end of that series of crises. Okay, so and what he said actually kind of disappointed me, because it showed that if you are not affected by something, of course the thing does not exist. So this is a problem. Just a criticism there. So this is what we see. Okay, these crises were a result of tensions, simmering tensions, not because of resources at this point. Okay, that's set of crises, but because of the rising tension between the weakening of Islam by these minorities in the Middle Belt that were increasingly in number and becoming Christian. Okay, this was the result. Okay, and so Islam, organized Islam, began to react. Yes, and this was what happened. Vis-a-vis, and the reason why these crises now blew up in 2001, okay, till date, it was because of the international, first of all, Nigeria was becoming democratic, had become democratic, okay, and people were able to air their opinion more easily. And of course, this created an international issue. I have talked about that before, okay, and that is what now led to the insurgency. That's the second stage of the crisis. Okay, we're in the second stage of the crisis, or the third stage. The first stage was the Danfodio issue that went up to the 80s. It was finally quashed in the 80s, 1980, in the Metesine crisis. The second stage of the crisis was in the 90s. Yes, starting from Bauchi, Kaduna, and in Jos, and ended in Kano. And the third stage of the crisis started in 2001, was more international. Okay, it was more international, with epicenter in New York, Jos, and in Iraq, and all. Of course, the Middle Eastern crisis, the Gulf War, was already going on underneath. Okay, so that was the third stage, and the third stage is still going on up to now. So if you understand that, you will now understand the nature of these crises. Now we're going to decide, is it a genocide? So, deciding what is a genocide and what is not is normally a statistical thing, okay? It is a statistical thing. And I was one of the critics at the early stage, especially when there was a very, very terrible attack on a village just at the outskirts of Jos called Dogono Hawa, and it was a very devastating attack. And I remember somebody gave me the pictures of this attack, and people began to peddle the word genocide up and down. And I said, no, don't be in a hurry, okay? Not just Dogono Hawa, some happened in Bassa area. Later on, some began to happen in the Bokos area. And people actually use the word genocide very easily. And yes, some of us criticize it, don't use that word yet, okay? When you make things too common, they don't really help. Somebody even gave me the pictures of the Dogono Hawa thing, but I did not publish it because the desire of any responsible person at that time was to kind of douse the tension so that it will not escalate. When people look at such pictures, they get emotional and they do things that they shouldn't do. So I did not publish those pictures. Instead, I went on air and on the internet preaching peace. Okay, I thought that was better than aggravating the situation. I still have the pictures of it today, but I've never published them. Okay, so those were really gruesome attacks, and we're talking about hundreds of people being killed. Okay, just in a few days, on just a day and a night. And from that incident, which was around 2010, 2011, such attacks have continued. Okay. All over the country, as it were. Okay, and like our Bishop Benjamin Kwashi has stated clearly, even in Muslim areas. Okay, so such attacks have continued. Okay, and during election period, sometimes it's on a weekly and sometimes monthly basis. Okay, so sometimes it got so much. Okay, that some of us got tired. And this is the idea. when I'm talking about the forces at play, okay, they are actually trying to wear us out, to wear the people out, so that the more you talk about the problems, the more they continue. Okay, so we actually have gotten tired of even talking about it. Fine and good, I may not have the figures here, okay, but based on the frequency of the reports, will I term it as a genocide at this point? Probably. Okay, probably. Okay. I'm still going to talk a little about some of the problems that are making some people not really draw attention to these things. And what are these issues? The fact, strangely enough, I would agree with Adefarasin on this. Some of the people from the West, but I will not rush to blame Trump yet, okay, actually created a problem. And what problem did they create? Instead of coming to say, this side stop fighting, everybody concentrate on his own thing, okay? Their solution was, let's douse religion and let's talk about business, okay? For so many years now in Jos, Reverend Dr. Benjamin Kwashi mentioned this also. For so many years, good people began to get bad because I am being killed, I'm being destroyed, and you're telling me to just do business. Okay, that doing business is going to solve the problem. And it wasn't happening. Okay, the more they started resorting to cheating one another. Okay, on the streets, online. Some people were being blamed for the crisis. And they made it, some of these foreigners made it look as if we could just gather against this one or two people, mostly religious figures, of course, and blame them for the crisis. I think I was one of those. Then the crisis will stop. And these increased the amount of persecution on these minority Christians. Okay? And so that is why there is some skepticism about allowing Trump in. Okay? We are wondering, is it going to end up like the Afghanistan situation, where even some of the friends of the United States could not get safe haven when the Taliban was reconquering territory? Or the Iraq situation, for instance? So not everybody is excited. No, not everybody believes that any US military intervention is going to solve any problem. I can go on and tell you about my personal experiences within these 10 to 15 years. Where on Facebook, I was very tactically contacted by some people. I don't know whether they were intelligence officials from outside the country, probably the US, trying to get my input on, the situation. And it got so bad, I had to stop using Facebook, I had to stop at a point, so these people have not really played a very positive part in this crisis, okay? And right now, Nigeria is going back to religion because the negation of religion has not helped. Okay, people have started killing each other in the name of business. Okay, so this is the issue, and this is what I may say. Even if there is a genocide in Nigeria, will boots on the ground from the US solve the problem? Not looking at the Afghanistan situation, not looking at the Iraq situation. Okay, maybe Trump as a person can do something, but is Trump going to stay there forever? So this is a question that you ask. Okay. And, the fear is that he will just come and do the same thing the Nigerian government has been doing. Try to be neutral, but is there a true neutrality? Does such a thing as true neutrality really exist? So this is a question that you ask. Okay? This is a question that we ask. Even if there is a genocide, will he really solve the problem by boots on the ground? And I'm going to jump in and say this. The thought is good. The intention is good. May be good. Okay? But will the results speak for the intentions? This is where the skepticism is. Okay, so this is the problem. Okay, it is very responsible of Trump to make this gesture. Okay, looking at the Lebanon situation, what happened in Lebanon some years back, okay, some decades back, is good of him, okay, and it shows that the Christian community in the US is becoming more responsible to its duty, okay. But before any action is taken, it is good to sit down on the drawing board and look critically. Okay, what is going to be a long-term solution? Okay, and what can be done so that Nigeria doesn't become a failed state, like we have seen in the Libyan situation, like we've seen in the Afghanistan situation. I am David Ndichinke for you today in Searching the Heart.
A sign of hope still lingers in the evening sky, and the cock still crows at dawn, that the children still have a future, that even in the dark their eyes still glow with hope for that pathway to justice, peace and equity, that even in their youth they will see a better Nigeria, and they shall have cause to smile again, that the elderly will lay down their heavy burden and cease from their struggle, and in their twilight they will see a glimmer of hope. At 50, let peace reign from engraved in gold and grow. A Christian partnership for a better humanity.